Kia ora mai tātou. Good on you for coming out on a wet night and being here and being prepared to listen to Paddy and to share some ideas amongst yourselves. So good on you. No mai piki mai rā. Kia ora tui. So just to start off with, let's start off with the karakia to open the space. Rapua, rapua, rapua to wānanga, wānanga ki utu, wānanga ki tai, wānanga tiki te tikanga. Tikanga anuku, tikanga rangi ki ahua te tikanga, ke papoki te pahara, o homie, huie, tāki e. Tēnei te mihi atu ki a tātou mā, e runga te karanga te rā. Tēnei te mihi atu ki ngā karangatanga maha te motu. Puta noa te taitukarau, puta noa, I tā whangarei te rangata parawa. Tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou, na mana whenua na iwi take take. Nā koutou te mana, a tātou katoa. A kia ora hui mai nā tātou. Greetings to all of us being here today, acknowledging particularly the First Nations people of this area, around Whangarei te Ringa Parawa, but also throughout Aotearoa, and acknowledging ourselves who are settlers, who come from settler roots, to be tangata Tiriti, people here, welcomed here under the umbrella of the Treaty of Waitangi. So ngā mihi kia koutou. I'd like to hand over to Yeta to do a bit more of an introduction, but no mai, piki mai rā, kia ora mai tātou.
Kia ora koutou. Kia ora Tim, o tō karakia mahana. Thank you Tim for your lovely karakia. Ko Yeta de Jong tōku ingoa. I'm here, one of the Network Waitangi crew hosting you with this event. So thank you very much for coming out on a rainy Wednesday night. And my job is to just give you a brief background of Network Waitangi Whangārei for those who may not have heard of us before or know much about us. So we are commemorating our 40th anniversary this year. We're not saying celebrating because we feel like the fact that we still are here and needed is not necessarily a cause for celebration, but anyway, we have Network Waitangi has been doing the mahi in this area for 40 years, starting out as Project Waitangi in 1985. With government funding, leading up to the 150th commemoration of the Tiriti signing in 1990. So the idea was that Tangata, or that Pākehā would be trained to educate other Pākehā because it was felt there was a lack of knowledge about Te Tiriti, particularly in the Pākehā Tauiwi community. So the government funding dried up, but the Network Waitangi carried on, strengthened from the anti-apartheid, anti-racist movement, and in response to a challenge from tangata whenua to continuing educating ourselves and each other as tangata Tiriti. So one of the founders of the group was the Reverend Joan Cook, who was a mentor and teacher to many of the original members. I've only been active in Network Waitangi for 2 years, so unfortunately I never got to meet her, but she was a very inspirational person who actually was Australian, so she came here and felt that things were not right regarding Te Tiriti or Waitangi and put a lot of her own time and energy into trying to restore that justice. So Network Waitangi Whangārei is committed to providing information, education and support to implement Te Tiriti, and on our 40th year that is starting to take more the form of looking at constitutional transformation rather than just implementing Te Tiriti, but going, what's next? You know, how do we do that in a way that is true to the original intent? So we were privileged to have Dr. Margaret Mutu give a webinar on that subject recently as part of our 40th birthday commemoration, so that's available on YouTube if anyone's interested. And then we've the Treaty and Me series is a recent introduction to our training which our training education program, and the intention is to provide new and challenging ideas for people to consider, both for those who've got some knowledge and those who are maybe seeking knowledge. So hopefully this will contribute to that. And we have one more session next week as well. So you'll see a few people around wearing Tangata Tiriti, standing with Tangata Whenua t-shirts. So those are our Network Waitangi members. If you need any more information, you can go see the people at the merch table or talk to any one of our members. Just a bit of quick housekeeping. If you happen to need them and haven't already found them, the whare paku are just out here. So where you came, just go to the left rather than the right where you came in. If we should need to evacuate, we can go out the door that you came in, or there's another set of emergency doors just off the back of the kitchen there. If you haven't already, please put your phones on silent. Just a quick overview of how the session will progress. So in a minute I'm going to invite Paddy to the stage and he'll talk for about 40 minutes. Then we'll have a break for 5 to 10 minutes and we'll pass paper and pens around so that if you've got pārtai or questions, you can write them down. We prefer people to write down their questions and hand them in so that we can read them through a microphone so everybody can hear, maybe collate similar ones together and sort of put them in a good order for answering. And it also helps for everyone to feel comfortable asking questions, even if you might be too shy to stand up and speak. So so after that break we'll get together again for about 30 minutes, and Paddy will be joined on stage by Moya Armstrong, who's one of our long-standing Network Waitangi trainers, and just so that we've got local information available for any questions. And we'll just wrap up with a karakia and a waiata, and then you're welcome to stay on for a bit, have a look at the lovely books on the merch table, get yourself a Keep Māori Awards badge, and we'll aim to finish by about 9 o'clock. So just before I introduce Paddy, I'll just give you quickly our community code. We're curious, open and respectful. We speak from our own experience. We make space and take space, and no one knows everything. We try our best, but we all have, different areas of knowledge. So I'll introduce Paddy now. Patrick Monaghan, good Irish name, describes himself as a Pākehā fella from Whanganui, just your average middle-class white young person in Aotearoa. He's a photographer, videographer, and dad of 2 young boys. So in response to seeing racism and misinformation in his community online, Paddy took to TikTok as Paddy the Pākehā to explore and dispel a few myths on issues such as Māori wards, special privileges for Māori, the meaning of words like Pākehā, and he quickly amassed nearly 20,000 followers, which is where I came across him. I'm not really a big TikTok user, but I happened to be on there and he popped up a few times in my feed, and I sort of thought, oh wow, this guy's just talks a lot of sense and is very relatable. So I'm delighted that he's agreed to come up here and be away from his family for a night and a couple of days. Paddy was also invited in November last year by the Toitū Tiriti organisers to speak on behalf of Tangata Tiriti when the hiko arrived in Wellington. So, it's lovely to know that he has the respect of Tangata Whenua as well. We thought his messages were too important to be confined to TikTok, so without any further ado, I'll invite Paddy to come up and speak to us in the flesh. Kia ora, Paddy.
E te wānau, ngā mihi o te pōnei, e ngā tangata whenua me mihi katika. Kei ngā tangata kua hui mai nei, e rere ana te mihi aroha ki a koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou e aronui nei ki tō tātou kaupapa hira. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora everybody, as was mentioned, my name's Paddy, and it's an honour to be asked to speak to you all this evening. I've written my kōrero out because, frankly, I have a 7-month-old boy, and not a lot of sleep is happening in our house at the moment, so I didn't want to get up here today, sleep deprived, and just wing it, because I probably wouldn't make a lot of sense. Much like the government at the moment, but that's a different story. So forgive the notes, but it is for all of our benefit. Since being asked to speak today, I thought it wise to take a look at the previous speakers for these events. And wow, imposter syndrome kicked in really fast, in record time, in fact. The quality of those speakers and their contributions are going to be impossible to match. So thank you again for the opportunity, and thank you again for coming out tonight. And I will do my very best to contribute in the only way that I know how, through sharing my random musings in the hope that it is useful for somebody out there. So let's do it. As was mentioned, I've tried to build a platform online over the past few years, talking specifically to Pākehā about the difficult aspects of our past, the effects that are still felt today as a result, and what the heck we can try to do about it all. Trying to explain things in a calm, logical, and measured way as an attempt to move the culture forward to a place of understanding. And my speech today will be no different. Directed at Pākehā, but hopefully for the benefit of all. But I did not start here. As with most of my fellow Pākehā and Tangata Tiriti, I'm sure, there was a time where I didn't feel so passionately about this topic and the need for us as a nation to reckon with our past, so that we can move to a more prosperous and fair society for all. In fact, far from being part of the solution, I was tied up in the same thought patterns that continue to cause harm today. So I've been on a bit of a journey, like many of you, I'm sure, and I'm quite fascinated how the process happens. It is certainly not linear or replicable across every individual out there, but I'm fairly sure that there are some common threads and ways of breaking through that are effective and worth noting. So I thought I would take a look at my past, my journey, and try and explain how I think I got to where I am today, and hopefully it adds something to your kete in the work that you do with your friends, your whānau, and your communities. Growing up, I had a very typical urban middle-class white upbringing. I was born in Wellington, Te Whanganui Aotearoa, Pōneke, lived in a largely Pākehā suburban neighbourhood, and went to a largely Pākehā school. Being a 90s kid, I was somewhat blessed, however, that I did have some exposure to the Māori language, both through school, with my Pākehā teachers making a real effort to try and teach us wāta Māori, greetings, and other useful phrases integrated into their teaching, as well as a developing media landscape that played a part in my learning also. It's nothing like it is now, but it was enough for me to feel that the language and aspects of the culture weren't completely foreign, which the same can't be said, unfortunately, for some of those growing up in previous generations. I reflect too on how impactful shows like Susie Cato's You and Me, I don't know if you've got kids and remember that on TV from the 90s, but how much of an impact that had on a young Paddy's mind. Her use of Te Reo Māori, a Pākehā woman, definitely registered at the time and imprinted on my mind to the point that I can still remember the words to some of her songs today. But don't worry, I'll spare you the karaoke. Maybe later, hey? I will come back to the role of children's media later on, but it's worth noting that it was in the 90s that this really picked up steam. So I did have some exposure to the language, but if I'm being honest, I had no real concept of the culture. I knew that the language was different to the language that I spoke, but I couldn't yet fathom that there was a people for whom this language belonged, a people who looked and thought somewhat differently to me. By my count, if my memory serves me right, of my class of about 25 students, 4 were Māori, one of whom was a very good friend. So I had some proximity to the culture. However, it never registered higher on my radar than small observations, such as my mate Shane being able to do a haka like the All Blacks. That was the limit in an environment where my language and culture were so utterly dominant that anything different was simply kind of interesting, but nothing more. How far our education system has come in the past 30-odd years, albeit not perfect, the exposure students of today have is so much more deep and meaningful. So I'm now a 12-year-old, and we're entering a new century, and my world is about to drastically change. My family had made the decision to move from Wellington up until my mum's hometown of Whanganui. I was gutted to say goodbye to my friends, and I expected it would be difficult to have to start fresh and build new friendships in my new home. But what I didn't expect was a culture shock, yet that was precisely what I got. I don't know how much you all know about Whanganui, but I would submit that it is a very bicultural town, not dissimilar to Whangārei. Although it's becoming more multicultural now, certainly in 2003, it was Pākehā and Māori. It is one of New Zealand's oldest towns and home to a vibrant and passionate population of tangata whenua. I still remember my first day of my new school. I remember it just felt different. For one, it was much more of a small town school compared to the big city school that I was used to. It was basic. Kids ran around and barefoot. The buildings were old, and most surprisingly to me, the faces were different. To a 12-year-old Paddy, I'd never seen so many brown faces in my life, and I felt something was different too. The culture emanating from the school was different. There was kapahaka, karakia Māori, and more. Now, just to put this in context, this was by no means a predominantly Māori school. It was a middle to low decile Catholic school that just so happened to serve a community that was much more diverse than what I was used to. I was only at that school for a mere 9 months before I moved on to secondary, but my worldview and understanding of the world around me completely began to shift at this time. I was finally exposed to a world outside of my own, a world that interested me and that I enjoyed exploring. I'll briefly touch on my secondary school experiences next, but then I'll share some of my thoughts on my schooling experiences as a whole and what lessons I take from them. I began secondary school in 2004, at yet again another Catholic school, classic Irish, eh? But as with my last change, this change too would once again be a culture shock. At that time, my secondary school was about 50% Pākehā, 50% Māori. Not only were the demographics so evenly split, but such was the strength of the Māori department that the culture of the college certainly embodied aspects of tikanga Māori that I had never witnessed before. We had seriously impressive pōweri for guests, a kapahaka group that were regional champions, and a Māori principal that would begin every assembly with karakia and mihi in te reo Māori, carvings adorning areas of the school, fluent speakers competing at manu kōrero at a national level, and so much more. The culture was thriving and prominent in almost every facet of school life. This increased exposure once again added to my understanding and appreciation of the culture. Its presence was increasingly felt as I aged, starting as a blip in Wellington, growing as I arrived in Whanganui, and now very prominent as I entered my secondary school years. Although its presence was at an all-time high, so too started the bigotry. The discontented parents who felt that the Maoris took up too much attention. Some of my peers who regurgitated their parents' racist stereotypes and remarks from home. And teachers with clear bias towards the Māori students. Upon reflection, it was clear what was happening, that the strength and prominence of Māori within that space rattled the feathers of people who were altogether uncomfortable and unfamiliar with the balance. So I had all these things in my direct vision, a loud and proud people expressing their culture, and some others who looked like me, rejecting and confronting that culture. And just like that, the tension grew within me that had not been present before. A tension that I'm sure many of you here as non-Māori have experienced in this room before at some point, where you feel a sense of appreciation and connection to a culture, but at the same time you're told by others in the media, whānau, friends, that culture stands to take something from you. That is, in a sense, wrong to embrace a culture that is not your own. that doing so somehow takes away from your ability to live and express your own culture. Not that I was very clear on what my culture was at that point. So there was tension created, and from that tension rose fear, a sense of division, and stubbornness as a means of protecting one's identity. For me, this happened during a period of my life through the exposure to culture that I experienced, but I'm sure for others in this room and others listening elsewhere, this could have happened at different stages for you. But it is a common experience. For some, it's as simple as having to face Māori greetings on the TV or radio or on the phone, or seeing the language displayed in the environment. That can be enough to create the tension of us and them, and in turn, resistance. Upon reflection of my schooling experiences, I think it's clear that the moments of culture shock that I experienced were as a result of society's conditions being heavily skewed towards European values, language and worldview, and colliding that with the other, a people with their own distinct culture and beliefs which I valued and was interested in, but all the same was different, was apart from me. And it was at this point of friction that most people have a decision to make, either to embrace or to reject. This looks different in different people, but an example of embracing may mean remaining curious or wanting to learn more, asking questions and seeking answers, being willing to challenge one's beliefs or considering other perspectives, acknowledging that we are different and not demanding conformity. Rejecting too comes in many forms, varying from overt remarks, belittling, closing one's mind off, not being interested in the answers, seeing the culture as of low value to yourself, and so on. And I'm sure we all know people that fall into that category. So, what factors predict which route we take? I've thought a lot about this, and I don't pretend to have all the answers, but comparing my experience to some of my peers who are more on the rejection side of the ledger, and trying to pinpoint the variables that explain the difference. I think that we have to acknowledge that proximity to culture is a very important factor. As with my educational journey that I've just shared with you now, it is clear that as the culture became closer, so too did my contemplation and awareness of it. When it's in your face, you're more likely to give consideration to it. You're more likely to want to understand. So, proximity is undeniably important. However, proximity alone is often not enough. So we will need to dig deeper. But first, it is at this point that I wish to acknowledge the amazing work that all of our kaiako, our teachers, do, because for some people, for some teachers who do the best to integrate te reo Māori and tikanga into the classroom, is the closest thing that some kids will get to the culture, depending where they live and the communities that they reside within. That for them is proximity. As with Susie Kato for me, as well as some of my early primary school teachers, the impact and awareness that provokes cannot be understated. That is why the recent move by the government to axe funding for teachers to learn te reo Māori is such a harmful move. Citing no evidence for improved outcomes for Māori has shown both that their data is kaka, because I don't believe that for a minute, and secondly that they completely missed the wider point, that this is not the only measure that determines success, that their spreadsheets have failed to capture the enormous impact that a teacher with te reo Māori and tikanga knowledge has on a classroom, both in building relationships and trust with Māori students, but also too, the impact that their teaching is having on a new generation of non-Māori who are more open-minded, empathetic, understanding, and less prone to racism. I think now of the amazing children's media being produced in te reo Māori and also English that demonstrates and gives life to the culture. Things like books, TV shows, and even Disney movies. This media landscape is completely different to what it was 30 years ago, with so many touch points available for our tamariki to engage in the culture. And its prevalence is teaching them, at the very least, that this is something that is important and of value. So I want to return for a moment to my journey beyond school to see if there's any other learnings that I can share with you. Following my secondary school years, I did tertiary education locally in Whanganui, and after that I took up a job in my old hometown of Wellington. Although that job didn't work out and my life in Wellington was short, it just so happened that during that time I met and began dating my now wife. It was with her that my journey would continue to develop. Little did I know that at the time, but my wife was on a powerful yet difficult journey of rediscovery of her own culture. With a Māori father and English mother, her life up until this time was a typical tale of an urbanised and disconnected Māori person, someone who longed for a deeper connection to her culture, yet did not grow up with the language, and was working through all the emotions and challenges of reconnecting. I have a better understanding now of what she was going through, but at the time, I was pretty clueless. And yet, it was exactly this moment that I, this skinny Pākehā fella, came into her life. And although I'm sure she was overcome by my good looks and charm, I'm sure part of her must have thought that given the journey she was on, a relationship with a Māori man would have in some ways been easier and more aligning. But you know, sometimes you can't choose who you love. And so our different paths converged and we began to navigate a way forward individually and together. Like a small-scale model perhaps of society as a whole, Māori and Pākehā coming together. For me, that included the need to confront my prejudice and privilege like never before. Proximity, once again, was an important force in shaping my thoughts going forward. As I witnessed the wahine toa within my wife rise up with elegance and passion, it's safe to say that it brought to the surface in me some insecurities, prejudice and resistance as I struggled to understand why exploring her Māoritanga was more important to her than anything else. And that knee-jerk reaction in me to remind her that other things are important too is a result of the discomfort that I felt when she was unapologetically Māori. It was not a reaction that I'm proud of, but one that was necessary in my journey. I've thought about this a lot, and I'm sure many of you also have had similar reactions in the past, and have attempted to understand why we are inclined to push back, to resist, to cling on as if someone discovering their Māoritanga is a challenge to us directly as Pākehā. It's an interesting phenomenon. I think part of it is the misconception that it is one or the other. By embracing one's Māoritanga, you are in effect somehow suppressing one's European heritage. That both cannot coexist, and therefore you are choosing the other team, so to speak. And it's therefore seen as an attack on our own heritage, on us. Then I also think there's an aspect of jealousy involved, a desire for us to be able to stand proudly and wholeheartedly in our heritage. And yet I know there are several reasons that this is difficult to do as a Pākehā. Firstly, because we feel that embracing our heritage is somewhat shrouded in taboo, that the difficult aspects of our past, especially if we haven't done the work to understand and unpack that past, is scary and unsettling. Secondly, I think we have too lost something as a result of colonisation. We have lost our connection to our heritage beyond this place. That in order to become Pākehā, New Zealanders, our ancestors, our grandparents, our parents and ourselves have had to let go of our rich and varied history before we came here. Aspects of that heritage which live on through us, yet we remain blind to. We have intentionally forgotten so that we can create space to start again, to pursue a collective identity that is homogenous as New Zealand Europeans, that love steak and cheese pies, gumboots, buzzy bees, the All Blacks, ginger nuts, but does not necessarily desire anything deeper. But by prescribing to this identity, I think at times we can see its shallowness and therefore can't help but be jealous towards the depth and breadth that the Māori culture contains. By saying that this is me, by placing that flag into such shallow ground, we inherently recognise the risk that it may topple over. So we brace, we must defend and repel. So these are some of the feelings that I was beginning to feel as I was observing my wife flourishing in her Māoritanga. But for others, it may be simply observing a friend going through a similar journey. Gosh, even a media personality. It could be enough to cause a sort of identity crisis within yourself. And yet, I believe this is a good thing, a necessary thing, something we need if we wish to progress as a people. We need to recognise that the twisted story that some of us have been told up until now about who we are and what happened here may all be rubbish, may require us to completely revisit and rethink everything. It is an uncomfortable experience that I desire to induce in as many people as I can, to trigger a flurry of questions within their mind about who they are, where they come from, and who they can be. Now, projecting the outcome of that crisis isn't always easy. It can go one way or the other. It can lead to an opening of one's mind, a development of an empathetic attitude towards those oppressed, a newfound willingness to listen to those you previously ignored, and a desire to do better and grow. Equally, it can result in a hardening and resistance, a desire to be obstructive and belittling to the desires of others, and most of all, a deepening of the fear that change poses. So it may create either of these results, but the alternative, in my opinion, is far more damaging. A population of people who remain ignorant and indifferent, who desire not to engage at all costs, and who ultimately become unreachable. Circling back to what I was saying earlier, one of the reasons why I'm so for resourcing our teachers and building curriculums that aim to educate on these issues is so that this process can begin early and not leave anyone behind. Anything that we can do at the primary and secondary school level is going to have disproportionately positive outcomes. Whether that's teaching our history in schools, compulsory te reo Māori up into a certain year level, investing in our teachers for cultural competency and language, paying for cultural advisors and professional development in every school, and initiatives that we are yet to dream of. The way that I see it, the better foundation that we can lay, the more likely it will bear fruit in years to come. Also, we know that young people are less likely to have had the opportunity to learn wrongful myths of the past, to have learnt to be racist. So there is less unlearning that needs to occur, less baggage to unpack before progress is made. We can take the passing lane and speed towards a future where, with the least amount of friction possible. But you may ask, what do we do about the adults? Particularly the more challenging individuals that seem more closed off. Well, in the spirit of learning from the past, I would like to now borrow and completely repurpose a verse from our history to illustrate one methodology I think could work. George Grey once said to the Māori king that, "I shall not fight against you with the sword, but I shall dig around you until you fall on your own accord." So, although the context of this quote is completely different, it contains an interesting perspective that is applicable here. Instead of fighting our opponents face to face, which is our instinct sometimes, with the hope that we will achieve our desired result, maybe instead we focus our energy on chipping away at the edges, working in the peripherals, working to make these issues present in every circle, discussed at every dinner table, and so present in the social consciousness that after time, these people don't even realise that their foundation has completely washed away. So that is our job, that is our work, our responsibility to ensure that the conversations never fade into obscurity, that in every channel, every avenue, the important conversations are taking place. It's tiring work, I won't lie, and it can be fraught with negativity and doubters. But someone has to be out front giving it voice, and those people can't always be Māori. After all, as people of the treaty, it is equally our responsibility to ensure that we have an informed public. Returning back to my journey once again, one of the paths that I went down, and a path I strongly encourage other non-Māori to walk down also, was delving deeper into my family's past. my origin story, discovering the tales and stories and people that shaped my family and myself during our time in Aotearoa, and importantly, before we even set foot on this land. Although my ancestors here felt it necessary to amputate the family tree in order to reinvent themselves and conform to a developing New Zealand culture, I sought to reconnect, to understand how and why my ancestors would be so willing to leave their homeland to build a life for themselves here on the other side of the world. For me, this journey was so empowering and eye-opening. It made our nation's history feel less distant. It brought it in close, sometimes uncomfortably close. It gave me understanding, and maybe most importantly, it gave me empathy, not just for my ancestors, but for Māori here as I began to draw similarities between the struggles of my tupuna and the struggles of Māori. It started making sense why we were not told about the challenging lives navigated by our ancestors, as for many, it eerily mirrored the same themes of dispossession, colonisation, and alienation that are also present here. In my case, I learnt about the oppression of the Irish Catholics by the British, how for over 800 years they were not allowed to be free. They had most of their lives restricted to some degree for the benefit of the coloniser. That they had their land taken, their language suppressed, and their traditions erased. You learn the fact that the reason they ended up here was to seek refuge from their oppressors. And yet, somewhat surprisingly, for many would forget that, ignoring the harm that they themselves were doing. You realise that in order to justify the harm and to solidify their place and their newly improved place in the hierarchy, they needed to close the book on the past. Because otherwise, how could they tell tales of oppression, of colonisation, of alienation, and not see their role in the exact same things here? I learned that my ancestors were outspoken advocates for Irish independence, for the revitalisation and protection of the Irish language and culture, and universal human rights for all. I learned about relations that I never knew I had, like the great Daniel O'Connell, the liberator who did so much to improve the lives of Irish Catholics, who advocated for the abolishment of slavery and Indigenous rights around the globe, including Māori. This process of reconnection grounded me and showed me that I have a lineage, not only of people who suffered at the hands of colonialism, but who fought back against it, who knew what it felt like, who fought against it with all their power and did all they could to seek equality in the face of persecution. And yet, on the flip side, also contributed to the machine of colonialism here. I think this process is incredibly healing and powerful for any Pākehā to go through, regardless of the origin of your ancestors. Whether, like me, they were Irish, Scottish, or Welsh, who were subjugated to the British oppression, or British subjects themselves, as they escaped an oppressive class system that left them impoverished and with no hope of improving their own lives. Whether they came from the continent and experienced endless revolution, brutal warfare, and oppressive regimes for centuries. In my experience, you don't have to look very hard to find the reasons why our ancestors left. Their desperation and aspiration for a better life. And once you connect those dots, it makes seeing the picture here on this land a lot clearer. I'm not saying that we ignore the aspects of New Zealand culture that we have developed here, that we see the work of our ancestors as purely destructive. What I'm saying is that we have the ability to reach beyond simply that experience, which tells us only so much about ourselves, and often leaves us with more questions than answers. Instead, we can build empathy and understanding by learning the stories of the past. Briefly on the topic of history, it is my belief that we need to build a deeper repertoire of media that explores our country's colonial history in a way that is engaging and powerful, particularly for our young people. We need more movies, documentaries, VR tours of battle sites, walking tours of our towns, podcasts, and other forms of media to make exploring that history exciting for our population. Like many teenage boys, I went through a phase of being obsessed with learning about World War II. I knew all the names of the battles, the weapons, the uniforms, every little detail fascinated me. And I think part of the appeal when it comes to learning about that time is the amazing media and preservation of knowledge that makes engaging in that space entertaining and quite frankly fun, despite the troubling nature of the subject matter. And I think we need to do a similar thing here. There are many doing this work already with their history, but there is so much more room to grow and evolve and discuss. And we need to ask our creatives, our reporters, and our funders to continue to find and create in this space to bring that history to life on a platform where young people spend a lot of time. What's worth mentioning too is that we have more work to do in educating our people about the places and spaces that we live. There is such a rich tapestry of history all around us, in every town, in every city, in every piece of land that goes untold. It is a travesty that this history is made invisible to us. Again, there are amazing people doing work in this space, but the fact of the matter remains that many people know nothing about the area that they live, the foundation of their township, the historical owners of the land, the tales and stories over hundreds of years that make this place they live interesting and vibrant and unique. Having spent some time in Europe, one of the things that they do so well over there is telling the story of their spaces. And that history isn't always easy or comfortable, similar to here. I think how amazing my experience was on walking tours through places like Berlin, where the history on every corner is talked about and explored openly and made accessible, not only to residents, but also to us visitors. Many people wrongfully believe that we have no such history here, that that type of thing is exclusive to overseas, and that our history amounts to little more than a few myths and legends. But that could be no further from the truth. One of the aha moments for me was learning about the amazing stories where I live. I was blessed out of the blue one day to accompany a group led by a local kaumatua on a history tour of our central city, as he shared stories and knowledge passed down to him from his tupuna. I've also had the opportunity to talk to Pākehā experts on early colonial history, as they told me about stories of buildings and people from that period also. It gave me so much more meaning to my surroundings. It gave me appreciation and fascination towards my environment, and fed my desire to continue to learn more, because that history informs our present. We are merely adding to the story that pre-exists us. And if we know nothing of that story, then not only are we missing an opportunity to live richer lives, but we are also wrongfully given the impression that our history is shallow, and that, therefore, we are disproportionately important within that history. It is humbling and it is eye-opening. And we have so many amazing local experts that are willing to share that knowledge, if only we can open our minds and see the value in ensuring that every citizen and every resident learns about the place they call home. I guarantee you that if we could make this happen, we would have so much less ignorance and racism. But in order for that to materialise, we need to pour energy and resources into making the spreading of information a practical reality, as well as overcoming the barriers of closed-mind decision makers who shiver at the idea of learning about our past. So I think we need to learn history in a broad sense, in a deeper sense, and in a local sense. That is what gives us the full picture upon which we can begin telling our own story. So that is just a few of my rambling thoughts, disconnected as they are, with unanswered questions and some ideas littered throughout. But if I was to summarise, there are a few things that I think we should be focusing on to build more tangata tiriti. So let's run through some of them again. Starting young, we have to relentlessly invest time and money into our educators and our education system, which includes new media, to foster understanding and knowledge to ensure that every child in Aotearoa can experience some exposure to culture, even those living in largely monocultural spaces. Secondly, for adults, we need to continue to flood the environment with information, education, debate, protest, advocacy, things like this. Anything we can do to make these issues omnipresent, to slowly but surely chip away at any unsound foundations so that they fall on their own accord. Thirdly, we open the history box. We talk about and encourage the teaching of our country's history so that the shroud of ignorance is lifted. Combining that with the power of whakapapa, as I was talking about, reaching further back into our family histories to discover similar tales of struggle and colonialism to build empathy and a personal connection that is so much harder to break. We have to make sure that every resident understands the story of their town, of their city, of their neighbourhood, that they don't live in blissful ignorance of the past that literally surrounds them every day, and where they falsely see themselves as the main character. These are only some ideas, some simple starting blocks dreamt up by myself, but some that have been highly effective for me in my journey, and I'm sure will yield similar results for others. However, before I go, I would finally like to lay down a wero to all of you here today, a challenge. You all have knowledge, you all have a voice, and you all have the ability, in your own way, to continue making Aotearoa a better, more accepting and treaty-led place. So what are you going to do? Are you going to use your tools? How are you going to use your tools, your experience to effect change? You need to realise that you are dangerous to those who wish to prevent progress, who seek to dominate and to confuse. So I challenge you to think bigger, to think bolder, and to take action. Maybe there's something you've wanted to do for a while in this space, but haven't yet mustered the courage or taken the time to make it a reality. Start today. Maybe you've been holding off having conversations with people that you know, loved ones, because you don't quite feel ready or you feel unsure about how it will go. Have them today. Don't seek to become the perfect tangata tiriti before you begin using your voice, because it will never happen. Let your journey fuel your desire to effect change in someone else's. Maybe it's for a wide audience, maybe it's just for your partner or your child, your friend. Kei a koe te tikanga. Hioi anō, māranga mai e te iwi, he mahi nui kei mua i a tātou, nō reira, kua takoto te mānuka, ka wea ake. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, Paddy. That was amazing. Once again, I've been lucky to actually hear you speak twice today, which is I'll be listening to it again on the video at some stage.
Painful.
So yeah, very inspirational and a good wero at the end for all of us. Agnes and some of our Network Waitangi crew are now going to go and bring around some pens and paper. So if you've got any pārtai or questions that you'd like to pose to Paddy and Moya, please write them down. We'll take about 10 minutes. If you need to use the wharepaku or grab a drink or something, you're welcome to do that in the break, and then we'll call you back and we'll have a great Q&A session.
Awesome.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
All right. Kia ora, everyone. I've been told I'm to speak a bit louder by the sound engineer, who's also my husband, so I'd better do as I'm told. Welcome back. I think everyone's mostly back. So we'll get started with this is Moya Armstrong from Network Waitangi. For those who don't know her, she's world famous in Whangarei. And just what I think of it, because I'll probably forget later, I just want to say a big thank you to all of our kaimahi in the kitchen here too, who've, and at the door and at the merch table, and yeah. Anyway, so we'll start with our Q&A. So Moya's got the questions there. If you do have any burning questions that you realise you suddenly wanted to ask and you've forgot to hand in, hopefully we'll answer most of the questions if there's time, but if there's a really burning issue, just wave your hand in the air and someone will come around with a pen and paper so that we can read it out through the microphone and make sure that everyone hears it. So over to you guys.
Kia ora, Yeta. Hey, and give us a wave when we're on time, because the number of questions we can go on all night probably. So kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, tangata tiriti, tangata whenua katoa. And so interesting with your Whanganui
yes, yeah, the dialect I learned, It's embedded in me now, it's hard to drop. When I'm in the north I try to, because it's much, and that's right, whānau,
whānau, tangata whenua.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. That's all right. We heard Tariana Turia, introduced us to the Whanganui dialect.
Yes, she's amazing.
For a long time.
Yes.
Hey, just some reflections on your awesome speech.
Oh, thank you.
You know, we, I suppose, because we're both wearing, Māori Awards badges today, we can't help but mention that we've got to celebrate that Hobson's Pledge scored an own goal today. So,
I was reading about that. Outrageous,
Yeah. So some of you haven't caught up with the news. Hobson's Pledge have got millions and millions of dollars, and they must have printed like thousands and thousands of these
and billboards
anti-Māori billboards, massive billboards. Apparently there's some in Whangarei, and that was where it was first spotted. There's a kuia from Rotorua with a moko kōai that features on these anti-Māori ward billboards. And her mokopuna rang her up at 1:30 this morning and said, "Nan, what do you think you're doing?" And she had no knowledge of this, so a stock photo. And so own goal, because they've withdrawn all of those billboards, apologised. Yeah.
Hope it goes further.
They can just withdraw altogether. Yeah. And the other thing, of course, that happened today, I know that you were asked to speak at the Treaty Principles Bill Hikoi last year.
Yeah.
So I was wanting to ask you how that felt.
Oh man, that was a day. That was like, did anyone manage to attend? Yeah, oh wow. Oh, lots, fantastic. It was one thing being there, like it was just like the most exhilarating, like unifying day, and then another then to like go through this like, and then have to go on stage in front of everyone. But it was one of the honours of my life. It was amazing, and like just feeling the energy and power there. I tell a funny story. When I first got on stage, I was obviously nervous, and so I thought, I'm not going to look up. I'm just going to do my thing and get off. And funny enough, before I said that, they said, "So Paddy, we're going to put you in between Rawiri Waititi and Hana. Is that okay?" And I was like,
No, it's not.
oh my gosh, okay. And then next minute I'm on the stage after Rawiri spoke, who it was amazing to feel that close. And then, so I try to keep my head down, and then I look up. The first person that I connect eyes with directly was Te Ariki Nui Ngā Wai Hone Te Pō, like just straight in her eyes. And then so I was just like, okay, back down we go. But just a magic day, and I think some of that energy from that day is still going strong now. I think we captured some of it. Just want to keep it going though, because it showed what we were capable of at our best day. No, we're all very proud, to see that the Pākehā was asked to speak. I was very surprised it was me, but I did it.
And so the other thing that happened today is, the government is talking about a new foreshore and seabed legislation going right back, right back to almost worse than the original one. And so Annie Sykes is suggesting another one. Wow. So are you up for another hikoi?
I might pass the baton to someone else though, to speak on that one. But no, that is, gosh.
So we might be having another hikoi. And so just some other reflections about, the role of the Irish, Scots and the Welsh that you were talking about here.
Yes.
And how maybe it's also is that the pain of the first generation of migrants
Definitely.
is almost not wanting to remember to pass the stories on because of the loss.
That's a fair observation. Yeah, I think that definitely happened. It was like coming here was like a rebirth, in many ways for themselves. I mean, for generations, like I think of like my ancestor who came here. He was northern. He was Catholic. It wouldn't have been an easy life, and I know that because I've started looking into sort of the history. He was a weaver. He was he had a kid out of wedlock. It would have been an absolute, like, a tough life to live in. No doubt that they wanted to come here to wipe the slate clean and start afresh at a new place in the hierarchy, because for so long they were like below second-class citizens. Yeah, definitely.
We talk a bit in the workshops about the great chain of being, where that some of those the sort of lower class, working class serf peasants, white from Britain, are at the low end of and then the animal kingdom, and then in some versions of the great chain of being, the native peoples are even below the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
And so I was just thinking about that mentality of, well, we might be really poor whites, but we're white. We're
totally.
Poor, but we're white.
And that was invented though, in a sense, wasn't it? Like as a way of saying and preventing collective action between those lower class. But you can imagine if people came here, from Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and in a different manner than they were, which was typically with the British Army or through New Zealand Company kind of style things, that maybe it could have been a very different world. It could have been a very different country because there could have been much more collective action and unity happening. But as it happened, no, that identity of, yes, you're saying, like the whiteness, the invention of it's us and them, prevented that from happening, Yeah, definitely.
Really strong, 500, 600 years of that white supremacy sort of ideology.
Well, Irish weren't even seen as white, like they were seen as, especially from the English, they were seen as subhuman at times and stuff like that, which is just crazy to think of. There's always someone has to be in that position, How, the world broadened and so they passed that baton to someone else, but at that time, they had to find someone in Europe to give it to, so was it,
Yeah, the capitalist trick.
Yeah.
So, I heard Vincent O'Malley in his little bit of a webinar
He's amazing.
recently,
Yes.
and he was saying that Irish people were part of that army there was the second largest number of British Army people were in New Zealand.
Oh yes, sure.
The only more British Army people were in India.
Really?
So the one British soldier to every 3 Māori men, women and children was the scale of the violence.
And of that, I think he mentions too in his talk. He always says like 2/3 were Irish of the actual army. So it's just a crazy thing to fathom. But it makes sense if you think about what they were trying to do to escape. A life of that was not great, but. Yeah, and you have to take the good with the bad, and that's part of the whole working through the history, right? Like understanding what they went through, which was not pleasant and not what we'd wish on anyone, but then also understanding that they did also, when they did arrive, whether they were traumatised, whether they were just trying to do whatever they could to improve their own lives, they did cause harm. So it's like both of those things,
Yeah. The interesting thing, though, is about the illiteracy.
Yes,
and
it's
it's
very
just the
illiterate,
same
weren't they?
with any, downtrodden population.
People,
illiteracy, you either go into the army or prison.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think Susan De Silva's the expert on this, but I think at the time there was something like 37% of the British population were incarcerated in either, poorhouses, workhouses, orphanages, insane asylum, all of the rest. So.
And that's the other truth is we don't know their stories because of that either.
Yes.
So like we don't know what they really felt.
Yeah, but
Vincent talks about that, how it's a shame. He talks about like sentiments, like, you know, that they started becoming disillusioned with the fact of what they were being asked to do, which makes sense, but I really wish we had some chapter and verse on it, because it would be quite powerful, I think, for us to be able to, as us here, 2025, trying to understand.
Yeah.
You know, but so it was, you know.
Also, they didn't know really, but when they got here...
Correct, yeah, that's what I mean.
And then they started seeing the situation and, hang on,
journals
this is, you know, what happened at home. And the level of desertion was huge, apparently.
It was,
once they realised.
Intermarrying.
So I hang on to that, you know, that once they could see the British, you know,
had a massive
colonial
problem,
project
at
work again, they deserted.
Yeah, I would have been straight into the jungle, mate. It would have been... I'd have been out.
Well, I guess...
I'd like to think, but...
It was a bit more straight into the fuddy.
Yeah, true, that's right.
I think they ended up marrying Māori women.
Bit of a shack up,
Yeah, they definitely shacked up. That was what Vince and O'Malley reckon, anyway, so... And so the other one was about, you know, how interesting it was that... the missionaries speaking in Te Reo Māori to educate and make literate the Māori population here, while the children of the British settlers, working class settlers, were out the door. They weren't there, right? So that drive to have their religious conversion to save the souls of the heathen savages trumped the class system. You know, like trumped that whole...
absolutely. Yeah.
Or the other way around, you know what I mean? So the lower class, and that was when the surprising statistic that more Māori were literate than the settler children.
Yes.
Yeah, so really interesting how that worked out. Hey, and just one last thing, when you talked about, you know, proximity, you know, and how proximity is so important, because if you don't know any Māori, well, but you know, when Māori TV happened, and I thought, okay, this is it. This is a retiring moment. You don't have to do any more of this, because all the people who sit in the comfort in their living rooms and turn on Māori TV, and boom, proximity,
correct,
and that overcoming of the fear of the unknown.
Yep.
But it didn't happen, Paddy.
No, it didn't.
No. Because first of all, people had to turn on to Māori TV.
And that's like, you know, and then when you see it being forced more into mainstream as we see today, what do you see? You see this like enormous backlash, you know, of like, you know, and so I applaud those that are trying to pull it into the public, public arena, but you're right, just having it there, and that's why I say proximity alone isn't enough. Whether that is knowing people that are Māori, whether that is having that exposure to culture through other means, that's one factor, but it doesn't necessarily determine where we end up. And I've seen that throughout my life with, like I said, like my secondary school alone should have been enough to have me in a place of understanding. But when we left, there was some that were worse than when they started. Like it was, you know, and so there's a lot at play there, and I think intergenerational stuff as well, you know, home lives, education of the parents, just everything, you know, like, so yeah, it's a complex piece. I don't have the answers to it, but I'm still fascinated in trying to understand it.
Sure, right. So what are some of the phrases or questions or statements that you use to open the conversation on this topic?
Man, that's a good...
At the dinner table.
Oh gosh, I did say talk at the dinner table, didn't I?
Or wherever.
Maybe less on phrase, but more on tone. I think there's a place for, and I truly believe it, there's a place for every tone. However abrasive some people might find someone's approach or someone's tone. But obviously, if we're approaching it from step one and trying to see someone... help someone see a different perspective. Obviously a tone where it's more asking questions, posing things to them rather than trying to pontificate, and just get them thinking. They may still recoil, but like that has been the approach that I've taken, what I've tried to do online, To what degree it's successful, I don't know, but I definitely think that is a good first step. And then you still need those people that are confronting. You need those people that are like, say the words in your face for you to, it's like on multiple levels, if that makes sense, you know? So I try and do the more softly, hey, have you thought about this? What about this? Like, I know, like, you know, politics is a classic one, right? Like, people I love, people I know, good friends with, I feel like I'm, like, buddies, like we get each other. They'll vote in ways that I can't even comprehend, but it's for reasons that they do not, I guess what I'm saying is, the reason I wouldn't vote for them is just invisible to them. So they're saying certain things, and anything else, oh, I can look over that, or I don't, treat, whatever, yep, treaty, yep, fine, I'm more interested in this, you know? So it's bringing it back, and I often say, okay, that's cool, that's interesting that you're interested in that, but what about this side effect that's happening? What about this other policy? How do you feel about that? Making them to address it, like having to address it, rather than just being able to say, oh, yeah, whatever with that, I don't care about that. Well, no, you should, because the more power and the more energy and influence you give these people, the more that these peripheral things will continue to happen. And are you okay with it? Are you okay with the effects of that? So yeah, I think like in that way, if that makes sense.
Basic cause and effect.
Yeah, but also like just the little things that people miss, and they do miss it. Because we live in this world, we're interested in this stuff, so everything we pick up on. And we're like, but then there's so many that aren't. And so it's just sort of like slowly, you know? Yeah.
There's one of those early books on whiteness was called Seeing the Unseen.
I haven't read that.
It's a little bit of like that, is
Love that.
making visible
The
some
invisible.
of the things.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a really practical one. Any suggestions about how you challenge incorrect pronunciation?
Yeah, I'm big on it. First and foremost, always, and I was guilty of this in the early days, of just bowing to it. Like, you know, like if someone, like I live in Whanganui, and then there's a lot of suburbs that are like Māori names, like a classic one is Aramoho, where I live, and the default is Aramo. That's what 90% of people know it as. And every time someone would say, where do you live? I would say Aramo, even though I know. And this was in the early days. So the first thing is not bowing to that kind of pressure yourself. And now I proudly, no matter who it is, if it's some koro that's telling me, so you live in Aramo, can you see Egmont from there? And, you know, oh shit, you know. I will stand in it, you know, like I will, and if you can be the best example you possibly can, I think that is the best thing. In terms of correcting, look, if that's the kind of approach you want to take, that's cool. I've found this approach really effective, just constantly battering them. If they say Aramo, I'll be like, no, you know, I live in Aramoho. It's an awesome suburb, Aramoho. Like, it's right next to, you know, Papaiti, and, you know, Aramoho's fantastic. Like, drop it 5 times, you know, like, you know,
Saturation.
by the awa, you know, oh, beautiful. So, yeah, saturation, eh? That's my approach. Try and saturate the space.
Saturation, yeah, total immersion.
Yeah. Total immersion.
Total immersion in conversation.
And you can see their face, they just, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a little bit a deeper one about the, you know, as we were talking about the cycle of the oppressed becoming the oppressor.
Yeah, cool.
Seems imprinted on our DNA. Is it a wonder Pākehā are fearful of Māori?
Of course.
How can we better understand this cycle and break it?
Well, that's what's preventing us moving forward, eh? Because I think everyone, even when I was in a place of non-understanding, I still knew that who got the raw deal here. You know what I mean? I knew it inherently, and I think everyone knows it. Whether or not they acknowledge it's a different thing. So I think in the background, everyone thinks, God, if they do 10% of what we did to them, we're going to be kicked into the sea, you know? And that's a fear that you have to overcome, but the only way I think that can be overcome is by listening to Tangata Whenua speak, you know, like and hearing about their vision for Aotearoa, hearing about the kind of nation they want to live in, and demystifying in a way, you know, like saying, because people assume and think, oh, okay, if Māori are given more power, does you know, are we going to go back to like, you know, parasites? You know what I mean? Like, what's it going to look like? That fear of the unknown again. So it's like, passing the microphone over, you know, to Tangata Whenua and say, tell me what's your vision for Aotearoa? It's the best way and you know, that's my
Yeah, no, I remember, you know, when Mike Smith chopped down the tree, and you know, all these people interviewing him, you know, saying, "Oh, do you want us all to go, Mike?" You know.
Yeah.
Just like,
it's such a leap, hey. It's
just ridiculous. Because one of his parents was Māori and one was Pākehā, and he said, "What do you mean? We're going to make some packed lunches and have everybody down on the beach?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, what would my mum and dad do about that?" You know, it was just ridiculous. And when
but that's fear, right?
Yeah,
like the power of fear. It's like the worst is going to happen.
Yeah.
And like I said, when we inherently know that we got the good deal, we can't help but assume that it will be reciprocated if that. But, you know, that's easily demystified as soon as you spend any time listening.
Yeah, and it's also, you know, I mean, with the women's movement, there are parallels with sexism and racism in this thing, is that when women got to power, some women, all right. Anyway. There is a group online called Tauiwi Tautoko.
Cool.
Have you heard?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. So this is a general comment for everybody, encouraging people to look for Tauiwi Tautoko. In the educating space, I encourage the challenging of anti-Māori racism. I recommend the course as another tool and toolkit.
Beautiful.
That's for people who don't mind diving into the comment sections. You know, beware the deep dive in the comment section. But this course provides you with training about how to dive in carefully and most effectively.
Oh, I could benefit from that. That sounds good.
It's really amazing.
It's usually block.
That's right. But totally, there's people have been working on this sort of stuff for ages and have come up with some really great stuff.
Obviously, I talk about Pākehā or Tangata Tiriti, but that's not to exclude Tauiwi because they have an important role to play too. I think there was a question earlier today talking about it. And that's for them to decide how they want to, you know, advocate and do the work they want to do. You know, I think it's awesome. It's so cool. And like even at the hikoi, right, like Tauiwi was so present and so vibrant and like so supportive. I think sometimes the depth of our connection here can be a blessing and a curse. Like the depth means that we're less likely to like, oh my gosh, there's bad things happen, there's oppression happening. I'm on that course because I'm a person of justice. We have to filter through all of the feelings and the, you know, the history we have. So for Tauiwi, sometimes it's like, it's a quicker connection. That makes sense. And I've seen that. Like it doesn't,
because you know, they know the colonial history from their own country's history.
Exactly. Yeah.
And usually they you know, they actually got a history lesson in their countries as well, which so they go, that's
the connections.
And they're not frightened about it either, about more just understand it. Whereas Pākehā, we've got to get out of our little fear bubble.
Well, when you've had power for so long, it feels like oppression, doesn't it? Like
when things are neutral.
Yeah, totally.
There's a meme about that, I think.
Oh, true. There'll be a billboard soon.
Yeah. So you're really good on TikTok. I have seen one on somebody else's thing, which was about, you know, you're really, this misinformation is common in past and present. How do you manage it with the people you talk to? On your TikTok, you know, your factual correction of the mythology is just on point.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
As a trainer, I appreciate that because it's not always easy, and I think we can get caught up too of being, like, people will be like, oh, talk to Paddy about that because he'll know. The way I approach it is I try and learn issue by issue. Because there's so much to unpack, right? So when I learn an issue and I feel like I get it, and I think, oh my gosh, why do more people not know about this? Then I can talk on it. So but in terms of misinformation and that type of thing, yeah, I feel that that's the easiest once you understand the topic, you know, and move on. But man, there's some people whose knowledge is so much wider than me, and I'm constantly learning, and that's when I'm like motivated to like this new, you know, the bloody Winnie going on about, you know, New Zealand. It's, you know, this new piece of legislation he's bringing forward. Like something like that happens, and I'm like, boom, straight to like, okay, I've got an idea now. And you know, I need to research it. I need to dive deep on this one issue, narrow it, and go deep, and then do that a lot. And I think that helps.
And just edit out the guts of it,
Yeah,
and then get it on social media.
Yep.
No, a very valuable skill. I remember that book by David Slack that came out. So was it Bullshit and Backlash? What's it called? Something like Bullshit and Backlash, and it just came out brilliant series of digestible things like the amount of treaty settlements.
Oh yeah.
Less than a year's profit for telecom.
Or less than the one tax cut that they did last year.
Yeah,
all of them combined.
And you know, a third of the South Canterbury Finance bailout package.
A third.
That happened in 3 months, as opposed to 14
Are they up in
years.
arms about that? You know, blimmin' finance, you know, like, no.
South Canterbury Finance,
yeah.
Those people, those bloody farmers in South Canterbury. How do you overcome anger when talking to people who oppose sharing? Like when you get some real out-and-out racism, do you get angry?
Like for a long time I just froze because I just didn't know, couldn't fathom it, and I was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And that's been part of my journey of like trying to learn how to unfreeze from it. Because it is like, when someone comes that hot in, it's really, really hard. Like, how do I approach this? I still try and try and remain calm, try and ask questions. Man, I honestly think the best thing is asking questions, because they just dig themselves a grave like so quickly that you don't have to do anything. You don't have to educate. You just have to ask them questions, and they just fall, and it's great, and everyone gets to see it. But like, the anger is difficult because because it's so loud and in your face, it feels like it must be important, but it's not. It's just the same thing said quietly, but, you know, more intently. So it's like, I do the same things, just continue to ask questions, continue to pry into what they actually know, because more often than not, it's nothing or very little. Yeah, it's a feeling, and people get a feeling, like on an issue. If people feel like there's injustice towards them, they're going to come out hot, you know, and you see it all the time, but just bringing it back to,
Can I suggest a technique I've developed over the years?
Please.
Yeah, it's this internal swearing. It doesn't come out of your mouth, but you just, in that moment, you just getting it out and then composing and ready to respond.
Good on you.
You know, gently.
Good on you.
Yeah. I really recommend it. It's therapeutic. So kia ora, Paddy. Awesome kōrero, thank you. As an ECE kaiako, I wonder if you realise that Te Whāriki, the early childhood curriculum, was celebrated as the first bicultural curriculum ever developed.
I didn't.
Ever. Investment in learning needs to continue before primary school.
So yes, I should be specific. I don't mean to say it starts at primary. That's a very good point. And our ECU teachers do an amazing job for sure. So yeah, thank you. Definitely agree with that.
Yeah. And Play Centre were always right in there with the treaty education. Play Centre parents have just gone on to do, you know, massive things, and they got that treaty education in Play Centre.
So cool.
Yeah. So a couple of minutes, a couple more questions. Yep. There's so many questions, so little time. Did you encounter resistance from older generations to talk or share your family history? How did you
within
go
my
about
own family?
it within your own family? Yeah.
It's funny, like when I started discovering it, like doing my own like research, because I was fascinated. Honestly, it started with like, you know, the classic like pēpēha kind of thing, and then I'll be like, oh, okay, I don't, or wakapapa, you know, like you don't know your lineage, and then so I just start doing it myself. honestly, because I felt like I'd only even gotten little snapshots from my parents and from my grandparents. And so I was like, I'm just going to go there myself. And then all of a sudden, once I started doing it, oh my goodness, my dad and my mum and my aunties, everyone was an open book. But it was like, it wasn't until I showed intent to understand, and I wish it was more forthcoming, because, I would have been in the shadows for a far less long time. Like it was, so no, actually, once I started doing it, and there's a sense of, even though obviously some of the history is difficult and confronting, there's still a sense of pride of, this is you, this is where you come from. And so that they were willing to sort of entertain it, and talk about it. And then maybe I would bring up, that's pretty interesting, isn't it? Like, that was interesting that they did that. And they were like, oh, yeah. But, it is cool to keep questioning those things too. And that actually is opening the door with your parents to have those conversations. If they're coming to you, oh, yeah, well, let me tell you about your uncle and or your great-granddad, that gives you the opportunity to start the dialogue, go back and come back to them and prompt them to think about it deeper too.
Yeah, before they die too. Yeah, that's
ideally.
Yeah, ideally.
Yeah.
Yeah, people leave it though, eh? Leave it too long.
Leave it too long. Yep.
Yeah. My question is about working on the fringes in a world of social media, of algorithms, of struggle for narrative dominance. And I don't quite think the question got to the question somehow. It might have got lost from the first page, but it's a thing, isn't it? Algorithms and dominance.
Totally. I mean, it prioritises.
Yes, it just stumbled across you. So is it that sort of mantra of you got to like and share?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I've been so surprised though. Like when I started this, I was like, I'm just going to do my video about this and this one little topic that I know something about. Like it was just like one thing. And the amount of exposure and comments and interaction was like mind-blowing to me. So like there's definitely a place for it and definitely people that are willing to learn and engage in that space. Obviously the algorithm's going to prioritise things that are more confrontational and more like, or it tends to, I think. So sometimes you can be sidelined, but like you just keep doing your work and find your own voice. And like I said, every tone, every approach has its place. So you just stick to your guns, and that's my approach anyway. Yeah. So
is the difference between like and share and like, comment and share?
Yeah, I mean, ideally all of them, I guess. But definitely. Commenting and that stuff I think helps, because it shows that people are engaging on it, probably more than a like. But yeah.
All right.
Yeah, but then, like you say, the comment section become like absolute, no-go zones. Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, so understand that, people of my generation, if you want to beat the algorithm, the anti-Māori algorithm, anything that Paddy does or anything
there's so many creators,
like, comment and share. Right? So that is your,
totally.
That is actually a positive, proactive.
It does.
You're influencing
it
the algorithm, and it's all about the algorithm.
Yep.
So,
It
feels stupid and weird for a while, but
you're gonna be busy after this, hey?
Awesome, Paddy.
Thank you.
And I've got nothing more interesting to say at all. So.
Thank you for all your insights. Like, you know a lot about these things more than me, so it's cool. And thank you so much for coming, guys. Blown away seeing so many people. It was cool. Loved it.
Sorry, that's not. Yeah, it's hardly the hikoi stretching out before you, but we did our best.
It's harder though, when you actually see
real people.
Yeah, no Queenie here tonight, but like there's other eyes,
Might be a few out there.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Paddy. That was amazing. Just before I thank you formally, I'm just going to do a quick plug for our next session, which is on the next Wednesday, the 13th of August, with Kate Frickberg. which will be the last in this series, and she'll talk about dealing with tricky conversations about te tiriti. So Kate is actually going to watch all the 3 videos of the sessions that we've had so far so that she can add to the kōrero rather than repeating, you know, things that have, or maybe add and enhance, yeah. So that should be an amazing session. It's interesting that we're talking about people being afraid and wondering, not knowing what Māori want, you know, and thinking that they're going to be treated like
even a fraction
columnists have treated Māori. And I sort of thought of Mātiki Mai, which is the report on hugely well-researched kōrero all over the country of what Māori want. And so Network Waitangi have started running Mātiki Mai, like exploring Mātiki Mai reading groups, which is Agnes and Pat are doing, sometimes in person, sometimes online. So that's a really great place to start and direct people if they want to know what Māori want.
And the book is up the back.
Yes.
Mātiki Mai, is that $20, Susan? 15, a bargain.
Even
See,
bargain.
You know, rid yourself of any spirits of fear. It's a beautiful vision, beautiful and inclusive vision. Yep.
$15.
$15 going.
Okay, go on.
Yep.
And just about the tauiwi tautoko and the algorithms and that sort of thing. And it is important to remember, like if you see a post on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram or whatever, there are groups who have large armies of people who are poised and ready to put lots of negative comments, like hundreds sometimes, on a post about a particular person or topic. So it does mean a lot to like it and to write positive comments. And I haven't done the tauiwi tautoko training yet, but I'm planning to, because it is a way of countering that. But just also be aware that if you see something you don't like, don't share it. Don't share it. If you want to show someone, take a screenshot of it, because if you share it, it increases the algorithm. It says to whatever platform you're on, people are interested in this. So just take a screenshot of it if you want to do that, but don't share it, and don't comment on anything that you don't like, because that, you know, comments and likes increase the algorithm. No comments mean that it will hopefully
fade,
go where it belongs, into the dark of the internet. So yeah. So anyway, I won't carry on for too long because I left a little bit extra time for questions. But you know, do feel free to stick around, have a kōrero, buy some books if you find that the topics are of interest to you. Pick up leaflets about our workshops. But I mean, mostly I just want to say a huge thank you to Paddy. He's given up 2 days and a night with his whānau, although he's got whānau here too, which is
No.
And had a very long day today, probably up since 5 this morning. So just amazing. So we're going to applaud in the Pākehā Tangata Tiriti way, and then we're going to do the other way, the Tangata Whenua way, when my Network Waitangi crew come up here as well. So
cool.
Kia ora, Paddy.
Kia ora. Thank you so much. The book too. Thank you. I mentioned it. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. I'll stand in. Yeah, I'll come over here.
No, you have to stay in the couch.
Here we go. Tēnā koutou. Cool.
To finish with a karakia of unity and solidarity together. Whakamaua te kōrero, whakamaua te wānanga, whakamaua kia ranginui e tui honei, whakamaua kia papa tuanuku o takoto ake ne, whakatina ke te tumo te maramatanga, whakatina kia tina, haumi e, hui e, tāke. Kia ora mai tātou. Kia ora, Paddy.
Kia ora, kia ora. Thank you.
What brought you out here tonight?
An interest to see what's happening in the Tangata Tiriti space, recognising that I know what's happening in the Tangata Whenua space, I work in that space, but really curious to see who else is out there doing mahi, who else is speaking this kaupapa, trying to educate and trying to address this big issue that we have of not knowing who we are as Aotearoa, as New Zealanders. Coming out to see who's who in the zoo.
Kia ora. And what's your biggest takeaway from tonight?
I guess what I enjoyed about tonight was listening to often Māori hold the psychological, the traumatic burden of speaking this kaupapa constantly. And so it was really quite nice to hear clear articulation, clear understanding of people knowing who they are. For Paddy, for example, and his own Pākehā way of explaining it was great, because it goes, good, this is exactly the kind of thing we need. People speaking, knowing who they are, but in their own way, not trying to bring it all into make you Māori or make me Pākehā, but embracing that, the difference, and actually understanding that difference brings together the unity that we've been kind of aspiring to with Te Tiriti.
What brought you out here tonight?
I actually a couple of weeks ago saw some ladies at the library making the badges, and I got really curious, and I came to last week's one, really enjoyed the talk, and came again this week.
Thank you. And what's your biggest takeaway from this session?
Whakapapa's really important, I think. I think it's that connection to our past, to our histories, and I guess eventually at some point to land, to whenua. So I think we can learn a lot from that, and I think we can get a lot of healing from that too. So yeah.
Kia ora. Thank you. What brought you out here tonight?
I saw the flyer, and my wife has come along too. But I'm also Patrick, and I'm a relatively new immigrant to New Zealand, so thought it'd be interesting to get a proper Pākehā perspective and understand a bit more from a longer term point of view. Yeah.
And what's your biggest takeaway from tonight?
I kind of have I thought his approach to Tiriti was similar to my approach in life, of kind of approaching conflict with questions in a less confrontational way. Sometimes is quite an effective way of doing things. So kind of agree with that. But yeah, interesting to hear his views.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So what brought you out here tonight?
Because it's history. When I came to New Zealand for the first time, I was picked up on Auckland Airport and taken straight to the Hokianga. And Kuia and Kaumatua there took me under their wing as if I were their whānau. And to me, the treaty and honouring it and supporting people, tangata whenua, is very important. So yeah, it's a heart feeling.
And what's your biggest takeaway from this talk?
That I can be even more outspoken than I am. I'm a Dutchie. But also that it's important to start with the very little ones and talk to them about, this is a nice way you can play or do, and do it in a tikanga Māori way.
What brought you out here tonight?
Chance to re-engage with the issues around the treaty in a different way. I particularly enjoyed tonight in his expression of how his own journey was from a fairly staunch Pākehā, sort of moderately racist, and my father really didn't like Māori as well, But mind you, he was born in South Taranaki and spent some time in Pakaraka, just up north here, and so he had his narrative as a farming family cultured around stuff that was not of communications. And my introduction to Māori world really was late, you know. High school in those days, history was all not Māori. And I finished high school before 1972 when the Treaty Waitangi Act happened. And I suppose I was, although a fifth generation New Zealander, the first time I was ever formally on a marae was when I was 38. So it just wasn't part of my world. In my youth, I was more connected with people of the Pacific, particularly Samoans, than Maori, and it was a different world.
Right. And what have you taken from this evening's talk?
I think the way of doing the inquiry with people, just the ways of opening up the conversation, which is good.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thanks for coming.